Ethan Carter stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse suite. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom he had conquered. Success clung to him. Tailored suits, polished shoes, and an air of authority that made people listen when he spoke. Yet tonight, as he packed his leather briefcase for another trip, the weight of his absence at home pressed against his chest. Back at the Carter mansion, Anna Carter lounged in the sitting room, her fingers idly tracing the rim of a wine glass. The chandelier overhead bathed her in soft light, but no amount of luxury masked the tension in her shoulders. She checked her phone. No new messages. Ethan had promised to call before his flight, but she had learned to expect delays. Across the hall, 10-year-old Liam Carter sat cross-legged on the plush carpet of his bedroom, a half-finished Lego castle spread before him. He glanced at the doorway every few minutes, waiting for footsteps that never came. His parents' love felt like something earned only through achievements, perfect grades, polite manners. But lately, even those didn't seem to warrant their attention. Anna finally broke the silence when she heard the doorbell echo through the vast house. She rose, smoothing the silk folds of her dress, and greeted the woman standing on the threshold. Sophia Reyes looked younger than expected, with sleek dark hair pulled into a tidy bun and eyes that sparkled with calculated warmth. She clutched her modest handbag and a folder of references. "I'm Sophia," she said, offering a smile. "Thank you for considering me for this position." Anna let her in, leading her through the grand foyer and into the sunlit kitchen. The interview began with formalities, experience, duties, expectations, but quickly shifted to softer tones. Sophia had a way of speaking that made Anna feel seen, a sensation she hadn't experienced in years. By the time Ethan arrived home late that evening, Sophia had already settled into the guest quarters. Anna introduced her, and for a brief moment, Ethan's eyes lingered. He extended a handshake, professional yet firm. "Welcome," he said, his voice cordial but distant. Sophia returned the gesture, her fingers brushing his slightly longer than necessary. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'll do my best to keep everything in order." The days that followed slid into routine. Sophia proved capable, keeping the mansion pristine and Liam entertained. She played board games with him, read stories before bed, and laughed at his silly jokes. Liam's attachment to her grew quickly, much to Anna's relief. "Liam adores her," Anna confided in Ethan during one of his rare nights at home. "She's good at her job," Ethan replied, barely looking up from his tablet. But Anna noticed other things. The way Sophia lingered near Ethan's study or how her gaze seemed to follow him when he walked past. She brushed it off as paranoia, the product of her own insecurities. After all, Ethan barely noticed anyone outside of work. Yet Anna couldn't ignore her own unease. She often found herself staring at Sophia when the younger woman wasn't looking, comparing their figures, their smiles, their voices. At night, she stared at the ceiling, wondering when her husband had stopped noticing her. The breaking point came the night before Ethan's next business trip. Anna had arranged a family dinner, determined to mend whatever had frayed between them. But Ethan arrived late, citing meetings that had run over, and the carefully set table sat untouched. "Just eat without me next time," Ethan said, brushing past her toward the stairs. Anna's voice wavered. "Liam waited for you." "I'll talk to him tomorrow," Ethan muttered. But tomorrow never came. The following morning, Ethan kissed Liam's forehead and promised he'd be back in a week. He barely acknowledged Anna before heading out the door, suitcase in hand. Watching the car pull away, Anna felt an ache that had become too familiar. She turned to Sophia, who stood nearby, smoothing Liam's hair. "Thank you for taking care of him," Anna said softly. Sophia smiled. "It's my pleasure. He's a wonderful boy." Her words should have comforted Anna, but instead, they lingered, heavy and unspoken. Upstairs, Liam watched through his bedroom window as his father's car disappeared down the driveway. He didn't notice Sophia step into the room behind him. "Don't worry," she said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I'll be here." Her voice was soft, but the promise in it carried a weight neither of them fully understood. And with that, the mansion fell into silence, one that concealed the cracks beginning to splinter beneath its polished surface. Sophia's footsteps barely made a sound as she moved through the dimly lit corridors of the Carter mansion. The evening stretched long and silent, broken only by the occasional hum of the central air and the faint rustle of curtains swaying in the breeze. Outside, the moon hung low, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Inside, secrets stirred. Liam sat cross-legged on his bed, the glow of a night light softening the room's sharp edges. Sophia perched on the edge of his mattress, her voice a soothing melody as she finished reading his favorite bedtime story. "You're safe with me," she whispered, brushing his hair back gently. The boy smiled sleepily, already half lost to dreams. Sophia lingered for a moment, her fingers resting on his cheek before she turned out the light and closed the door behind her. Downstairs, Anna paced the living room, her bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. A half-empty glass of red wine sat abandoned on the coffee table, and her phone rested beside it, silent and dark. She had checked it too many times that evening, waiting for a call that never came. Instead, her thoughts circled back to David. Earlier that afternoon, he had texted, suggesting they meet for lunch the following day. The message had been casual, harmless even, but Anna couldn't ignore the flutter in her chest. David listened when she spoke, laughed at her jokes, and noticed when she wore a new dress. She hated herself for craving that attention. Sophia entered the room, startling her. "Everything all right, Mrs. Carter?" Anna turned quickly, pressing her arms around herself as if to hide something. "Yes, just thinking." Sophia tilted her head, concern etched across her features. "I can make some tea if you'd like, or sit with you for a while." Anna hesitated. There was something comforting about Sophia, her voice steady and reassuring. She nodded. "Tea would be nice." While Sophia prepared the tea, Anna sank into the couch, exhaustion pulling at her limbs. She could still smell Ethan's cologne faintly on the pillows, but the scent felt more like a memory than a presence. When Sophia returned, she sat beside Anna, too close for propriety, but far enough to maintain the illusion of formality. "You're too kind," Anna said softly, her voice brittle. "I know what it's like to feel alone," Sophia replied, her tone layered with something Anna couldn't quite place. "But loneliness can make us see things that aren't really there." Anna looked at her, unsure whether to be comforted or unsettled. Before she could respond, Sophia touched her hand briefly, a fleeting moment, gone before it could be questioned. The days blurred after that. Sophia's presence grew stronger, almost territorial, as she positioned herself deeper into the family's routines. She prepared Liam's meals, tucked him into bed, and even helped him with his homework. Anna noticed the shift, but said nothing. She convinced herself that Sophia's attentiveness was a blessing, not a threat. It gave her time to meet David for lunch, time to remember what it felt like to be desired. It started innocently enough, a lingering glance, a brush of hands, but innocence had a way of unraveling quickly. By the third lunch, David kissed her, and it didn't pull away. The guilt gnawed at her later, but she told herself it was Ethan's fault. If he cared, he'd be home. If he noticed, he'd ask questions. But Ethan's absence was louder than any accusation her conscience could make. Meanwhile, Sophia's influence over Liam deepened. She whispered to him about how special he was, how lucky he was to have her. She made him feel protected, understood, a refuge from his parents' shadows. But Liam wasn't the only one falling under Sophia's spell. When Ethan called to check in, Sophia's voice carried through the speakerphone, warm, inviting, and undeniably intimate. She laughed at his jokes, complimented his work, and offered reassurance that Liam was in good hands. Anna overheard one of these calls and felt something tighten in her chest. She told herself she was imagining things, but the way Ethan lingered on the line, the softness in his voice, told another story. Late one night, Anna passed by Liam's bedroom and heard whispers. She paused, pressing her ear to the door. "It's our secret," Sophia's voice said. "You can trust me." Anna's heart pounded. She wanted to barge in, but fear rooted her to the spot. What secret? What had she missed? By the time she found the courage to open the door, Sophia was tucking Liam in, her expression as calm as ever. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Carter?" Anna nodded stiffly, but dread pooled in her stomach. Ethan was returning in 2 days. He needed to know what was happening under his roof. But would he believe her? Or had Sophia already taken root too deeply? The question hung heavy as Anna turned away, leaving the shadows to whisper behind her. Ethan Carter's car rolled to a stop in the circular driveway, its headlights slicing through the early evening mist. He stepped out, the weight of exhaustion pressing against him. But something else lingered, a feeling he couldn't shake. His call with Liam 2 nights ago had been strange. The boy's voice had been hesitant, guarded, and the brief mention of Sophia's nightly visits gnawed at Ethan's thoughts. Inside the mansion, the air felt heavier than usual. Ethan loosened his tie as he walked through the grand foyer, his footsteps echoing. The house should have greeted him with warmth, but instead, it felt colder, unfamiliar, as if it no longer belonged to him. "Ethan?" Anna's voice drifted from the kitchen. He turned to find her standing by the counter, her hair loosely tied and eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. She set her wine glass down too quickly, the sound sharp against the marble surface. "You're home early," she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan nodded but studied her carefully. "Where's Liam?" "With Sophia." The name settled uneasily between them. Ethan didn't miss the way Anna's fingers gripped the edge of the counter. "Why with Sophia?" He pressed. Anna opened her mouth, then closed it again, her gaze flickering toward the staircase. "They're upstairs." Without another word, Ethan moved past her, his steps quickening. The unease that had shadowed him now surged into dread. He found Liam's door ajar. The soft murmur of Sophia's voice spilled out, low and sweet. Ethan pushed the door open. Sophia froze. She sat on the edge of Liam's bed, her hand resting on his knee. Liam looked up, his face flushing with guilt or fear. Ethan couldn't tell which. "Mr. Carter," Sophia said, rising smoothly. "You're back early?" Ethan's eyes locked on hers, the mask of calm she wore only deepening his suspicion. "What's going on here?" Liam jumped up, stumbling toward his father. "We were just talking about school," he stammered. Sophia smiled, but there was something practiced about it, too polished to be real. "I was helping him with a project." Ethan's gaze hardened. "Leave. Now." Her smile faltered. "I don't think." "I said leave." Sophia hesitated, but under the weight of Ethan's glare, she gathered her things and slipped out of the room. Ethan closed the door behind her and turned to Liam. "What's been happening here?" Tears welled in the boy's eyes. "She said you wouldn't come back. She said you didn't care." Ethan knelt, his hand steadying his son's trembling shoulders. "That's not true, Liam. I'm here now. Tell me everything." Liam hesitated but finally admitted how Sophia had whispered secrets, made him feel special, and filled his head with doubts about his mother. Ethan's stomach tightened as the pieces fell into place. Downstairs, Anna stood by the staircase, clutching the banister. Sophia was gathering her bags, but there was no sign of regret, only irritation. "You're making a mistake," Sophia said, her voice low. "No," Anna replied, her voice shaking. "I made a mistake trusting you." Sophia stepped closer. "You don't deserve this life, Anna. And you know it. That's why your husband doesn't look at you anymore." The words stung, but before Anna could respond, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, his voice like a blade. "Get out. Now." Sophia's composure cracked. She grabbed her bags and stormed out, the heavy doors slamming shut behind her. The house fell silent, but it wasn't the calm Ethan had hoped for. It was the quiet before another storm. Later that night, Anna sat on the edge of their bed, her hands clasped tightly. "There's more," she whispered. Ethan looked up from where he stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass. "What do you mean?" Tears slipped down Anna's cheeks. "David and it wasn't just lunch." The words hit like a punch, and Ethan's breath caught. He turned slowly, his voice low and strained. "You were with him?" "It didn't mean anything," she pleaded. "I was lonely, Ethan. I felt invisible." The room spun, but Ethan steadied himself. Anger flared, but it was dulled by guilt. Guilt for leaving her to feel that way. "I don't know if I can forgive this," he said, his voice breaking. "But I need to try. For Liam." Anna reached for his hand, and for a moment, he let her. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was a start. As the night deepened, Ethan locked the doors and checked on Liam one last time. The boy slept soundly now, but Ethan couldn't shake the fear that Sophia's shadow still lingered. Tomorrow, they would begin rebuilding, but the cracks in their foundation had been exposed, and some wounds would take far longer to heal.